next guest is James Corbett. He's an award-winning independent writer and documentary producer. Since 2007, his website, CorbettReport.com, open source intelligence news, has presented thousands of videos, articles, and interviews, garnering enormous and influential following and earning him a reputation for integrity and insight. I know our audience is going to be following this guy, has been for years, and is going to be very excited about having him here on the program tonight. James Corbett, thank you for joining us here for Dawn of the Truth.
Thank you for having me on.
So there is, other than just your presence and your wealth of knowledge about topics that our audience has studied in depth for so long, there's a reason I have you here tonight, because you have talked a lot about internet censorship, which is affecting us all and our ability to get our information out there. I know we're getting pressed by the algorithm, and I just want to know, does the truth and world events stand a chance in the current internet environment, in your view?
If I didn't think it stood a chance, I wouldn't be here talking to you. So obviously there is some glimmer of hope. But yes, I think that the forces are arrayed against us in a number of ways. And as you alluded to there, it is not just censorship in the way that people might think of that term. The most obvious form of censorship is when they literally just scrub you off of a platform altogether. And I know a thing or two about that, having been scrubbed off of YouTube for a number of years. I'm back now. For whatever reason, the YouTube overlords have suddenly decided that I didn't break their community guidelines after all. Oopsie. But I am still permanently suspended from Patreon because I will not delete just whatever random arbitrary things they want me to delete in order to conform with whatever standards they have. But beyond that form of heavy-handed total platform censorship, there is a much more concerning, existentially concerning form of censorship, which is algorithmic censorship, which is not something that you can ever put your finger on or point to unless you happen to have a whistleblower from the inside of an organization confirm to you what you already know to be true, which is that you are being algorithmically deranked. And actually, that has happened in Corbett Report history. For people who don't know the story, I did a documentary on the history of the Federal Reserve that came out in 2014. By 2018, it had become the #1 search term on YouTube for the search term Federal Reserve. If you typed Federal Reserve into the YouTube search bar, the #1 result would have been my 2014 documentary, until such time as Chris Hayes of MSNBC got on Twitter and started complaining about that fact, saying literally, what if you were a high school student and you were doing a research project on the Federal Reserve and you type Federal Reserve into the YouTube search bar and you get this? And he literally showed an image of the title screen of my documentary. Oh my God. Oh no. Heaven forfend. And wouldn't you know it, the very next day, Federal Reserve, no matter what search terms or what ways you tried to type it into the YouTube search, you would not find my post of Century of Enslavement. Even if you had the exact title in quotation marks with Corbett Report, whatever else, you could not bring it up on search. And it was confirmed later on by the Google whistleblower, Zach Voorhees. Am I getting that name right?
We interviewed him last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. It sounds like the antagonist of the Friday the 13th series, but that's Jason. Anyway, he, I believe, part of the documentation that he provided confirmed that that sites like the Corbett Report were being algorithmically deranked in the search. That to me is much more concerning of a form of censorship because, as I say, it is subtle. It is not something that you can point to like, hey, they deleted my channel. When you cut out a man's tongue, it shows that you fear what he has to say. But what if you just sort of put him in a room where he can talk as much as he wants to the 3 or 4 people who are in that room, but he can never get his voice outside of that room? That is more like what algorithmic censorship is. And I think it's something that we have to consider and contend with on a deeper level, because I think a lot of people still don't really understand how it works.
No, and even after last year, we did an hour with Zach Voorhees on our anniversary event, and you still have people saying there's no censorship on Google. even though there's so many videos out there laying this out. I mean, for instance, Truth Stream Media has an excellent video series where they document how, like, you can put in a term, let's say pizza, something innocuous like this. And it used to be that they would tell you, they'd tell you there's this many search results and you could click the tabs. Now they changed that so you scroll down and you don't even notice this. But then results will start repeating themselves as you go through the billions and billions of websites that supposedly come up. So you're really just getting, like, I don't know, I'm going to estimate like 30 different sites. Of course, if it's something controversial you're Googling, you're going to get the mainstream narrative on it. I know you type in 9/11 truth, you don't even see documentaries from AE 9/11 truth or other sources come up. You see mainstream media now, or you see some video that is alleging to debunk us, and then we just become the invisible man. And you can't even discover this stuff by accident anymore, because a lot of people found out about 9/11 truth purely by accident, like myself, right? And it used to be that, like, whatever was going to be the most watched video, or was the most watched video, like Loose Change or something by Alex Jones, whatever, used to get pushed up to the top of the YouTube front page. Google bought it. They started monkeying with it, and then it kind of got pushed off there. And then over time, we can just see more and more of the censorship take place. So it's almost like we have to work with the people that we took in back in 2008 or so, 2008 to like 2012 or 2015, because they do not want new people coming into this room. They want to keep us kind of confined behind this barbed wire, like these unreachable people being quarantined from the general public for their own safety.
Unfortunately, that is the situation we find ourselves in. And it really, I guess, again, we could lament that situation, but the real question is, what do we do about it? And unfortunately, I certainly don't have any inside help at Google or places like that would be able to get rid of such algorithmic deranking. So I think the real question then is, well, then what can reasonably be done about it? Of course, we can continue to try to get the word out on those venues, the very places that are populated by the very people who need to hear this message the most are places like YouTube and TikTok and these other centralized and very much censored platforms. But having said that, I think we should also be working to expand the alternatives that exist and trying to use the internet for what it is, a peer-to-peer network that allows for peer-to-peer connection. That is the very foundation of the internet technology that underlines the World Wide Web. And it should be the ideal to which we are striving, rather than all attempting to congregate on these controlled big tech platforms. To the extent possible, I think we should be informing our audience that these alternatives exist, so that when a YouTube or what have you decides to throw the ultimate ban hammer and completely get rid of us, people will know, oh, I don't have to get it from YouTube. I can go over to this other platform and continue to follow this person. That seems like a good thing that we could be working towards, at least in the meantime. Obviously, this is a much bigger issue than that, and I think we have to start addressing it at structural, fundamental levels. But at any rate, in the meantime, there are alternative platforms that exist and ways of getting this information out.
Well, it's funny, because for people like us who kind of came up watching 9/11 Truth or whatever on YouTube, and then we started to see the censorship and we learned what those alternative platforms were. So I'll use an example, BitChute. Now, it's a little glitchy sometimes, or you just deal with that. But I can find old things that I would be watching on YouTube in 2010. I can find them on BitChute, some of them. But not everybody knows what BitChute is. And this is going to come to what I call the saran wrap problem. And when I say saran wrap, it's like, a company has really succeeded when the product itself, no matter who makes it, who manufactures it, you still call it by one company name. Like, any company can make plastic wrap, but I'm still going to say saran wrap, no matter what it is, because that's just how it is. It's burned in my brain. So out there, people are always going to say, I'm going to Google it. Even if they're using another search engine, they say Google it, or they're going to go to YouTube because that is what they know. So people like us, we might know what BitChute is, but what about John Q. Public and those people who we want to come in to the tent and discover this by accident, but they're only going to use stuff for YouTube? How do we overcome that?
long story short, I mean, we don't overcome that in that way. What we do is we use the voice that we have on the controlled platforms while we have it to inform people about those alternative platforms that exist. And then it is up to them whether or not they will choose to pursue actually following someone on another platform. And this is something, again, that I have experience dealing with because once again, back at, I believe I should really look this up. Was it 2021 that YouTube finally decided to censor me completely off of their platform? And it was 2025 when they suddenly decided to give me my channel back. And I have witnessed at this point, thousands of comments that I have received from various people on YouTube saying, "Oh, James, I thought you retired. I thought you were gone. Oh, good to have you back." I didn't go anywhere, guys. I've been steadily and faithfully producing content for the past 17, 18 years now. I didn't go anywhere, but YouTube decided to throw the switch. And I think this speaks to something that Jack Dorsey said. I don't often quote Jack Dorsey, but here we go. A few years ago, he said that the great big wrong turn that the internet took, that he was partly responsible for at his time at Twitter, was the centralization of content discovery and identity in the hands of a few corporations. And that is such a profoundly important thing that we need to reflect on, because when people subscribe to an AE 9/11 Truth YouTube channel or a Corbett Report YouTube channel, they believe what they are doing is forming a connection to that person or that group that they want to follow. I want to follow this person. Please tell me about it. Well, first of all, now the way they've structured YouTube and Twitter and all of these platforms is such that even if you are subscribed, you aren't necessarily seeing everything this person posts, because even your feed is being algorithmically determined. But even if you do click the bell and jump the hoop and whatever else you got to do in order to actually follow someone, what all that means is you are connecting to that person's third person profile on that controlled platform. There are ways that we can imagine of people directly following the person that they want to follow in a way that does not admit of a third party middleman. And some of them are incredibly simple. And in fact, those technologies have been around for decades. For example, really simple syndication, RSS, is the way the internet was meant to work. With an RSS feed, essentially what it is, it's a bunch of code that I keep updated on my side, on my server, that will essentially broadcast out to anyone in the world. Hey, here's a new video I just posted. Here's a new article I just wrote. And it will broadcast that out. And anyone who is following my RSS feed will automatically get that through whatever open source third-party software they use for their feed reader, or they could even code their own if they know what they're doing. There is no third-party middleman that needs to come in between that transaction. When you follow my RSS, you are following me. But, and this speaks volumes. Back when I first started doing the Corbett Report back in 2007, RSS was fairly widely known. People knew what it was. People recognized RSS and were largely able to follow an RSS feed and use feed readers. But I noted at the time, when I first started, there was a service called FeedBurner, which was a very useful service because it took this RSS feed, which is a bunch of gobbledygook code that no one can read. What is this? It looks like nonsense to people. I get people get overwhelmed when they see something like that. So this was something that made a nice graphical user interface for RSS, and it looked friendly, and you just had to click a button to follow a feed kind of thing. It was great. It was a great and good service, and I had, I don't know, however many thousands and thousands of people following me that way. But then FeedBurner got taken over by Google. Uh-oh, I think we know where this is going. And of course, Google stopped updating or even making any sort of making it available. They just put it off in a corner for a few years. And then inevitably, okay, FeedBurner discontinued, doesn't work anymore. Done. Why would a giant behemoth like Google, with its billions and billions of dollars of investable capital, they're sloshing around, buying up why did they acquire FeedBurner only to kill it? What was the point of that? again, of course, it's because Google and all of these big tech giant monopolists or oligopolists know that their bread is buttered on the idea of people signing up for accounts with these big tech platforms and forgetting that RSS even exists. Here's this really simple technology that already exists that you can use to connect to people directly. No. What you need is to sign up for an account at YouTube or TikTok or whatever it is and follow people that way. That is the way the internet, as it could have worked, should be working, was, if not killed, at least severely maimed. And here I am trying to ring the alarm that maybe we should go back to some of these simpler technologies. Mm-hmm. And you would be surprised how many people hear that message, shrug their shoulders, and go back to scrolling YouTube. It is an uphill battle. And I think at this point, it isn't a technological question of whether we can evade this type of censorship. It is truly a question of letting people know why it is important that we should avoid the centralization of content discovery and identity.
Can I ask
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Andy. I was just curious about whether when your YouTube channel was restored, had you lost all of the links? Like, that people, like, where people would post a link to one of your videos on some other site, like, were those severed and then you had to sort of start from zero?
No,
they were.
They
were.
This is the interesting part of this, because you would assume once a channel has been deleted that it is gone and all the content is gone. No, of course not.
Right.
It's all still there on their servers. All they did was just make it so no one can access it. And then they flip the switch and now everyone can access it again. So all the links are still working. As far as I know, all the videos are still there. I didn't see any that were deleted. I still had most of my subscribers, but I still don't think that all of the subscribers are getting the notification that I exist anymore. But whatever. It's again, that's the algorithmic secret sauce that they'll never let us look at from behind the scenes.
Well, what I was going to say is that. Go ahead. Because you might be telling the story I was going to tell you to tell.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that when they went through a round at WordPress, when a lot of people, including me, thought, "Wow, it's a free platform for." I was very naive back in 2010, and maybe I've made them. I now have a Substack page. Maybe I'm being naive all over again. Maybe it's the same thing. But when they deleted my site in 2018, I guess it was, after basically Google had changed its algorithm anyway, and I wasn't getting any traffic anymore, but they deleted it, and that was the end of every single link that ever was, because it used to have WordPress right in the URL. So now I've recreated the site without the WordPress in there, but every single person that ever posted one of my articles, those links are all dead. So
no, extremely important, yes, that people think about this. And for content creators, at the very, very, very least, it is important that you keep all of the everything that you post. If you make a video, make sure you keep a copy of that video separately on your own system, don't rely on YouTube or anyone else to back it up for you, because I think we know how that can go.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about how this RSS feed goes, because my experience, now I'm not the most computer literate when it comes to websites and such, but I used to have a website a long time ago, and if there was another website that I really liked, rather than just kind of reposting the link to their article, I got lazy and posted in a widget that had an RSS feed to their stuff. So whenever they updated their site, it automatically updated on mine. And that is my experience with RSS feed. Beyond that, I'm kind of clueless. So an ordinary person who might be thinking about starting a blog or posting videos or such, how would they go about utilizing this so that the system can't just wipe them off the internet and they can get ahead of the game?
Yes. Well, for people who are absolutely allergic to even looking at code, let alone trying to code something, I guess, the options are somewhat more limited for those people. There are options out there, but I have noted, because I do keep my eye on this, that there are places like rss.com, I believe is one of them, that is essentially RSS as a service. You sign up and you create an account with them, and you put in your information and they'll make an RSS feed for you, etc. I haven't used it. I don't know how that works. I can't vouch for it, but that might be an option. But for anyone who is even slightly halfway competent or able to create their own RSS feed, I would suggest doing it. And I know it is a monumental pain at first, especially for people who aren't used to coding. But hey, I'm not a coder, but I've been doing my RSS feed for decades. And the real problem with RSS is also one of its great features, which is that it is open source. It is an open source protocol. It isn't controlled by anyone. There is no RSS organization that dictates how your RSS feed is supposed to work or what you should or shouldn't include in it. Every different feed reader will use different, allow certain features or disallow other features or what have you. So you create an RSS feed, and essentially what ultimately gets shown on the other end will depend to some extent what feed reader people are using. I mean, obviously you make it compatible as widely as possible. But the point is that over the couple of decades that I've been doing RSS, there's things in the protocol that have changed and different bits that have had to be reformed. And in fact, I just went through this a few weeks ago with my assistant here. We had to recode all of the RSS to make it work with all the latest bells and whistles. So it is a process. It is a time investment. But as I say, I would much, much rather invest my time in learning how to do that and having control over my content itself and how that content is reaching other people than having the ease and convenience of just giving your name, date, the birth date, blood type, and next of kin to some third-party big tech corporation that's going to eventually, of course, ask you to scan your eyeballs and fingerprints in order to create an account with them. I think we should be preserving these types of freedom-supporting protocols while we still have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and plus the social media is so intrusive. I could be talking about some topic with a friend on the phone, and then suddenly I'm on Facebook, I'm getting ads for this thing. Like it's listening to me somehow, either through the camera, or not the camera, but the microphone in the computer or whatnot. And the only reason that I have a Facebook is because of AE. I mean, if I'm ever not with AE at some point, I'm going to party like it's 1999 and we're going to go old school and get out of the stuff. But, you know, like it's like the if you're going to run business, you got to participate in this, but it's so intrusive, and I don't see any benefit to it if there's other alternative means of getting your information out there. Now, one thing that I have noticed over the years, like when I first started in the 9/11 Truth movement and was learning all about this information and connecting with people, it was broken up into different pieces. And you learned about a website, for instance, like Blacklisted News or Citizens for a Legitimate Government, InfoWars, obviously, and they just became your websites that you would follow, Corbett Report and all of that. And you would check in every day at your favorite sites, and you could get a general idea of what's going on in the world and what the overall truth movement thinks about it from listening to all these different sources. And it was great that way. And MySpace wasn't as censored because people would share information on the bulletin feature that they had. But it was broken up. And so the rationale within the activist circles was, well, we need to consolidate more, create a bigger body that has more force. But then as you create a bigger body, it becomes subject to COINTELPRO. It becomes subject to just other forces. And it's like a whole movement can get more controlled. So I've kind of gone in the other direction thinking, well, maybe it needs to be broken up more. Maybe we need to have more sources out there going independent, kind of go old school with at least 9/11 Truth or other movements and such, and just have some kind of listing of these sites that people can go to independently. So nothing can become corrupted.
Web ring. Remember web rings?
No, what is that? Tell our audience.
I don't.
So way back in like the 1990s, maybe early 2000s, World Wide Web, you would go to a website and there would be a web ring like box in the sidebar. And essentially you'd sign up for this web ring and it would have the links to all these other sites that are in this web ring. And you click one of the links and it'll take you to that website. And then that website will have the web ring block box there, and it'll have all. So essentially it's like a way of creating that kind of community of websites, but all the websites are their own thing, their own place. It's just that you would have the handy way to navigate through them. But here's the thing. Okay, I have a lot to say about this because I think fundamentally people are still stuck in the 20th century mass media mindset when it comes to the way that they think about these things. So back in the 20th century, of course, you could subscribe to the independent newsletter of this random guy or this small organization, and some people did, but it's obviously a lot of work. You got to find them, locate them, get their mailing address, write in, send your check for whatever, and then they'll mail you their newsletter. And man, that's a lot of work. How about I just buy Time magazine every week or whatever it is? And that collects all of this information from all these different writers and people around the world and things that I couldn't possibly subscribe to every single person. I mean, that would just be impossible back in the 20th century paradigm. So it was the way that it worked. Yeah, 99% of what people read and saw and heard on a daily basis was from a few corporations because they had the resources to be able to compile that information and gatekeep that information. But anyway, it's very convenient. So here we are in the 21st century, and guess what? You literally can subscribe to every single individual person's individual website or newsletter or what have you. And there's no cost of delivery, postage, or whatever. I mean, maybe if people put up a paywall, then you have to pay them for it. But at any rate, it's theoretically possible to do that. The fundamental physical limitation that came with the 20th century mass media paradigm has been completely shattered. But people are still in that mindset. Oh, I don't want to have to click to go to this website and click to go. I'm not, and look, I have 24 websites I want to follow. That's just a lot of work. Why don't I just go to Twitter? They're all on Twitter. I'll just follow their Twitter instances. Great. Okay, great. But I think that this is the wrong way of looking at it because, for example, I follow something, I don't know how many, but something like 100 different news sites that every single day I go through every single one of the articles they are publishing. I don't read every single one of the articles that are published on these 100 news sites, but I do look through the headlines. How can I possibly do that? Am I sitting there clicking through to 100 different websites already? No, I have a feed reader, an RSS feed reader, and it is automatically pulling every single headline. And the ones that I'm interested in, I can follow. I could go and read those articles. The ones that I'm not interested in, I can delete and I don't see them again. And via that method, I go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of news articles every single day. It's incredibly easy to do once you establish a workflow for it. And I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Insta. I'm not on whatever, TikTok, whatever the kids are on. I'm not on any of those social media platforms, but I'm still able to follow news. So imagine that.
Well, imagine if you had a movement of people. Let's say the three of us just decided we were going to do this. And WordPress is not that hard, folks. I mean, you can learn WordPress in an afternoon. And if you just want to make a basic site, so you have create a site. Let's say Craig does it. It's just calls it Craig's RSS site, and puts a banner on there, and then just populates it with the RSS feeds of every news source that he thinks is legitimate. Let's say James does it too, and I do it too. So now there's 3 sites out there just loaded with RSS feeds that that we think are good. And if you like us and trust our judgment on this, then you can go to these 3 sites and get a general idea of what's going on. And this stuff is free of the middleman, like James is saying right here. And if we all did this for $10 a month for a WordPress site, for instance, or whatever service you like, and just put those widgets in there, we could rebuild the kind of information sharing that we enjoyed that led to a 9/11 truth movement forming, a Federal Reserve, anti-Federal Reserve movement forming. What do you think of the scheme I'm coming up with right now?
I think it's better than what we're seeing with regards to the congregation of people on the big tech platforms. So yes, I'm all for that. And I think we should, it depends on who we're talking to and in what context, but we should probably at least mention that there is a difference between WordPress.com and WordPress.org and the open source CMS that WordPress is, which can be used by anyone in any context. And it's an open source thing that you don't have to subscribe to, versus WordPress.com, which will host your website. Right, Craig? No problem,
right.
Guys.
Right.
Well,
I actually
maybe don't trust them.
when I recreated the site, I had help, but when that happened, I ended up using WordPress's open source software. Right. So basically, my site looks just like it did before.
Yeah. But you can host it yourself on your own server, and
right,
it doesn't.
Right.
They don't control it.
And yet. Right. I've sort of done the same thing as I mentioned before with Substack, and Substack actually took me down for a day, and then they said, if you want to appeal, and I thought, I've been down this road before, so I did it. I clicked it anyway, and then they got back to me and told me it was a mistake, that their algorithm had told them that I was spamming or something. So they restored it. But it certainly woke me up again to the fact that, am I doing the same exact thing I did in 2010 with WordPress? But I got my, stuff backed up, and it's.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. At the very least, don't put all your eggs in a basket like that.
Yeah.
But yes, that's surprising, because I know the reason why I'm on Substack at all is because it was in the dark depths of the scamdemic that I was being censored off of everything, and the censorship flags were going up. But the one place where it seemed like you could talk about it and still you would not be censored was Substack. So I thought, well, they say they're in favor of free speech. They're showing that they seem to be in favor of free speech. So I can't think of anyone that I've heard of that has been actually censored off of Substack. But it's very concerning to me that they even have that algorithmic kind of thing going on in the background. That, oops, we accidentally deleted you. Don't worry, guys.
It's
well,
possible,
didn't Google
I
say
suppose.
"Don't be evil"? Didn't Google's mantra be used "Don't be evil"? And
didn't they
here-
remove that
Sorry, go ahead.
several years ago? Yes.
Well, I was just going to say, it's possible that it was innocently, that they actually do have an algorithm that is concerned about spam, and I'm not sure what about my site triggered that, but I can only imagine. But it's possible that, I mean, if they really wanted to censor me, they wouldn't have put me back up a day later or a couple of days later.
It does sound like it was an actual mistake, but just the fact that can happen is
the fact that I had to go through the appeal process, and with WordPress, they had the same thing. I clicked that too and never heard a word from them. So,
I remember years ago, and I was just a volunteer at AE 911 Truth, but they put me on this because they knew I would sit on the phone for hours, be willing to do this. But the Ed Asner video we had, Solving the Mystery of Building 7, where Ed Asner introduces it. And I mean, it had over like 1 million views. I mean, this was like our top video at AE. And YouTube just pulled it. No reason given. They just pulled it. And we were a little naive at the time. We thought we could just call up Google and complain like it's your dental insurance or something. And I called. I was working at a museum, but they were pretty cool about me doing AE stuff there. And I sat on a janitor's bucket in the closet on the phone for hours listening to their music. Of course, they never answered because they're not accountable to anybody there. This is not the public square. These are private companies, and they defend their right to just pull you off of there. But they do everything they can to eliminate the competition too. They're too powerful. Google is. I would like to know, because
this isn't the first time we've been in this position. I did a 5.5 hour course, an online course on the history of mass media, and I opened the first lesson by talking about the 2014 incident where some woman was very upset that she was being censored or algorithmically suppressed or whatever by YouTube, and ended up going to the YouTube offices with a gun. And I don't believe anyone was killed, but anyway, it was an incident. And I tied that back to it was a Los Angeles Times bombing that happened in the 1920s. And the story got convoluted, and who was really behind it, and there was some crazy story behind it. But at any rate, someone was upset with the LA Times reporting, let's put it that way, and ended up setting a bomb at the building, which I believe went off after hours. I don't think people were there at the time. But still, people have been mad about the media and the mass media's ability to censor their views and their thoughts and to spread dis and misinformation since the mass media essentially rose as an industry in the early 20th century, and for good cause, because it is so incredibly important. And I don't know, I can't obviously speak to anyone else's life, but I can say for my own sake, it sounds like we have had similar experiences, because I was an innocent English teacher here in Japan, just going about minding my own business back in 2006, when I started encountering 9/11 truth information, which was information that I was inclined to not only disbelieve, but actually disparage. I had spent the last 5 years essentially poo-pooing any hint of a whiff of conspiracy around 9/11. That's disrespectful. How dare you, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't until I was hit in the face with these types of videos that were presenting information that compelled me to start researching this and going, that can't be true. Is that real? Oh, Operation Northwoods, really? That really? Oh, wow. And I started discovering information. That was what put me on this path, which has utterly and completely transformed my life. And I get feedback on a regular basis from people saying that as a result of my work, that their life has been transformed. So I know the transformative power of media. I know how incredibly important it is. And even more so as we step more and more into what I call the media matrix, this age of screen time essentially overtaking real life time, to the point where people are steeped in media almost from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep. It is incredibly important in forming people's worldviews. That is why the big oligopolies spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to acquire these various big tech platforms and other such things, is because that is how you shape society in this day and age. Politics is downstream of culture, but culture increasingly is downstream of the technology, the media tech that we are consuming. So I think it really is incredibly important. That's why we are spending time discussing this, I assume.
I remember my mom saying, and I had just this little laptop, and when I was waking up to 9/11 Truth, and she had her last year before retiring from being a teacher, and I wasn't employed at the time, and I'm watching this. So she'd come home, and I'd have everything ready, and she would watch this. And she had this big screen TV, the cable package and everything, and that TV is on mute, and we're watching my tiny little laptop screen, and she's like, people pay all of this money for the big TVs and the cable packages, and the only thing that you can get any real information on is this little screen right here. This is crazy, you know? But I feel like the big screen took over the little screen. What I mean by this is, like, when we first started, if you wanted to do, I don't even think they were called podcasts yet. They were just called shows. You know, a guy had a show. A lot of times they were just audio. But if somebody wanted to start one, there wasn't a big profit motive. I mean, there were some instances where you could sell, gold if to get ready for the big collapse or whatever. But most people were just kind of doing it for free because they cared about where we were going after September 11th. And so they put their heart and soul into it, and they were dedicated to it. And then, and I'm sure at some point you were monetized on YouTube or whatever, but when it got monetized, all of a sudden this became like what we were suddenly became cool, and it could be exploited for money. And so I feel like YouTube has been oversaturated to the point where everybody and their dog has a podcast now. And it's just like an information overload, and we get drowned out because, you've got people you've got big corporations backing some podcaster. And it's like the mainstream media has taken over YouTube. Is that your observation too, or am I way off?
I wouldn't say way off, but I would differ only in that I think if it was the sort of the level-ish playing field that it was 20 years ago, in terms of everyone was, as you say, the YouTube homepage was just organically sort of whatever was trending that day was what was actually the most viewed videos, etc. If it was that kind of level-ish playing field without too much manipulation behind the scenes, then I would say, great. I think everyone and their dog should have a podcast. It should not be some special thing that only a special few get to do. Everyone go out there, have your say. And people who are, more informed, more interesting, more entertaining, I'm sure, will rise to the top, right? They let the best man or woman win. Great. But unfortunately, we don't live in such a level-ish playing field. We live in a completely controlled playing field where, as you say, there are big corporate and hidden interests that are behind the big voices that just organically and spontaneously rise to the top of everyone's feed, right? Yes. So I don't know. Color me skeptical when Tucker Carlson gets kicked off of Fox and starts his podcast, and suddenly millions of people are listening to this podcast because he is just the best podcaster in the world, I tell you. Or maybe there are other reasons for that. So yeah, I think it is not a level playing field. I think, and that is the problem. So I'm not at all for censoring people or saying that, people shouldn't be doing their, podcasts if they want. In fact, I'm always encouraging more people. If you think you have something to say it. It's just the question of the sort of the big tech and big corporate influence in all of this.
Well, let me tell you what. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say that what strikes me is it's sort of ironic in a way that a lot of the people coming together to try to fight this situation maybe never would even have come into contact with each other if it hadn't been for the internet. And I think to myself, I wouldn't know Andy. I certainly wouldn't be speaking to you. I wouldn't have, I mean, would I have even gotten involved in the 9/11 truth movement, or would I have just sat at home and read books about it? But I have contacts all over the world, most of them in the US, but, you know, um, so it's like a double-edged sword. It's been great to bring people together, but then once it worked so well to do that, then the other side had to deal with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could have been a janitor at NIST.
You could have been?
If it wasn't for the internet, maybe I would have been working at NIST cleaning the bathrooms or something, I mean,
it just occurred to me, we are just on the cusp of the 17th anniversary of the release of NIST's WTC7 report. So there you go. And in fact, it occurred to me specifically because in preparation for our talk today, I was thinking about this concept of censorship and as it pertains to 9/11. And so I was looking up the articles that were coming out earlier this year regarding the Senator Ron Johnson calling for a hearing regarding 9/11. And I was looking at the NBC News coverage of this. GOP Senator Ron Johnson wants to hold hearings on what actually happened on 9/11, which of course immediately starts by talking about how Senator Ron Johnson said this week that he wants to hold congressional hearings on a debunked conspiracy theory about the September 11th attacks, saying that there were an awful lot of questions. So they immediately start by saying it's debunked, right? Before they even say what that theory is. Eventually, further down in the article, it is revealed that the particular theory they are talking about is WTC7 and what may or may not have happened to it. And they say Johnson's comments focused on a long debunked claim about a building in the World Trade Center complex that collapsed hours after the Twin Towers were brought down by airliners. And the link to the words long debunked goes to NBC News' 2008 report on the release of NIST's WTC7 report, which I guess, there you go, guys. NIST did this report 17 years ago. No further questions. Done. Long debunked.
Well, there was some writer.
The crazy thing about that is that do the editors of NBC News still believe that they still have the ability to try to do that, to try to lie to the public's face like that? Oh, long debunked, don't worry about it. How many people at this point in time, in 2025, are going, oh, well, NBC said it was debunked, so I have no further questions. Perhaps I think the moment that best defines that was earlier this year on Stephen Colbert, rest in peace, as his show starts to head into the grave. Colbert was talking to someone from CNN, and he said something like, I know you guys, do your level best to report objectively as you can. And he was saying it in all serious earnestness, and the entire audience just erupted in laughter because they thought it was a joke. And that to me, is the disconnect between that 20th century media paradigm where we tell you what's true and what's been debunked, and you guys don't think for yourself, versus the 21st century where more people, I think, are at least thinking for themselves.
Well, I don't think the mainstream media people have any, they don't have any clue what else to do. They tried to start like internet shows. I remember CNN was going to start one, I think it was, and I mean, it went under in like under a month, and they couldn't even get the numbers that Alex Jones was getting or whatever. But there was some writer who wrote about how the mainstream media seems to follow a single script when they're attacking 9/11 truth. Craig, do you remember who that was?
Sounds like something I would have written, actually.
Actually, it was.
In fact,
talk about that. Well, that's my segue.
That was good. That was you had me hanging on the edge of my seat there. Who's he talking about? No, I took a sort of a look at this a few years back, and actually not that long ago. And it's funny you mentioned the thing about long debunked. I sort of went over like dozens of these sort of reports, just looking at how they deal with how they use the term conspiracy theory to basically cut off any credibility, or attempt to cut off any credibility of any article that would question any mainstream narrative. And the one thing that I was even going to bring this up anyway that struck me is that it's so pervasive that they will put often in the headline, put in either debunked or bizarre conspiracy theory or ridiculous. They have a whole. In fact, I listed a number of ones that they regularly use, and I thought to myself, this is so pervasive that I cannot believe that this is just individual writers each kind of coming to this conclusion. This is organized. This is orchestrated.
Okay, I have a very specific example of that. So I am releasing next month, I hope, if all goes well, a mini documentary of sorts on the concept of the weaponization of psychology and essentially the pathologization of dissent, which has clearly taken place. And prime example of that, of course, is the way that conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorizing has been pathologized. You're crazy. You're a crazy conspiracy theorist, right? There's more to that term than just a disparaging remark. It's clearly an attempt at actually pathologizing dissent. And in that report, I go through the very, 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 very many times that the concept of why do people believe in conspiracy theories has been used as the trope, as the defining trope of an article. And I go through, there are literally dozens and dozens of articles, dozens of podcasts, dozens and dozens of videos that I cite. And I go through them all in this big long list just to let people know I'm not making this up. They write this same story from this same template over and over and over and over. And it always, of course, comes to the same conclusions. These people are, of course, as long as they're not completely over the edge and totally crazy, maybe you can draw them back by doing this and approaching them like this and all of this kind of thing. But it's the same script that they're writing over and over and over and over. So yes, I would tend to think there's some coordination that goes on with something like that.
Yeah, I think that I'm very anxious to see that documentary when you have put that out, because it's definitely a subject I'm also very concerned about. And I find the word pathologizing interesting, because there are also, in addition to media reports that do this, and they do, as you say, they focus on what would make somebody think these things. So it's like, what is in the head of the conspiracy theorists? And I remember a report on CBC that even talked about the brains of conspiracy theorists being physically different from regular people.
Really?
But I know it actually was. They even had a diagram of a brain, but they. A lot of these reports will quote studies by, like by academic studies on psychology or different things to sort of back up. So it's not just the media, it's academia that's also kind of, giving people this this very distorted impression of people like us.
Yeah.
Well, I think
it's clearly a network of institutions, academic and industrial and corporate and media as well. And they form, it's been called the cathedral or whatever you want to call it, but it is essentially forms the consensus that determines what is real and what is debunked. And then they use those terms and expect people to believe them. But as I say, I think that if there is something positive to take from our conversation, I really think that for a lot of people, that spell, that magic power has been broken. The staff, the magic wand has been broken. I can't think of anyone that I know who just unquestioningly trusts whatever they hear on NBC News or CNN or whatever at this point. It is a joke, and everyone knows it, except perhaps for the dinosaur media people themselves. Maybe they still believe they have power over setting the agenda, but I think they're quickly learning that the comet is struck.
I agree with you. And, regardless of how you or anybody in the audience feels about the president, Donald Trump, he got branded as a conspiracy theorist, and then the majority of people voted for him. So, it shows that that's not working on people as much these days. And I think, most people, when I talk to them or I tell them what I do, they seem interested. I don't get the same kind of reactions as I used to. So it's like, okay, we've made that dent. But here's my question. Before 9/11, people didn't paternalize their government. They didn't get really offended if you threw out conspiracy theories about JFK. And then suddenly we had this horrific thing happen, and God, the flags were up in 24 hours all over America, and people would jump down your throat if you asked any questions about September 11th, and really set the human mind in this country, at least, far back. And so could another false flag, do you think, get people trusting the mainstream media again, get them believing their government again, because it's the right thing to do to trust your government?
Well, that is an important question, and we can opine on it, but I suppose reality will prove one way or another. But I would say, and I have said for some time, that obviously the pursuit of 9/11 truth is about the pursuit of 9/11 justice, finding the true historical record of what happened on that day and bringing the real perpetrators to justice for those events. That is what we're aiming at. But given the justice system or injustice system as it exists, and given all of the vagaries of the systems and structures and institutions we're dealing with, that still seems, unfortunately, a long way off. In the meantime, I would say perhaps the greatest accomplishment that 9/11 truth has accomplished, and demonstrably accomplished, is at the very least to get the idea, the concept of false flag terrorism into the collective public conversation. At least people these days, at the very least, are aware of the concept of a false flag attack and have some understanding of why a powerful body would be interested in attacking itself in order to obviously gin up wars in the Middle East or whatever else may eventuate from that. People at least can kind of get their minds around that. And I think that that is a positive development. So the real test then is, well, in the wake of the next big spectacular false flag, what will people do? And perhaps we have already seen some inklings of that. I think if it was the exact same type of event that took place in the exact same way, it would be a very, very different thing today, if for no other reason than back in 2001, having a camcorder or whatever was an extremely unusual thing. Mm-hmm. Not everyone was filming everything all the time. Today, if it happened, you would have a million videos of the event. So it would be a different beast just from that alone. But secondarily, I would say if it is not done in the same way, if it is done from a completely different vector, it can still have the shock and awe effect and still bring people together. And I would cite as an example of this, I do not know what you guys think about this, but I would say the scamdemic was absolutely a 9/11 updated for 2020. And it played on all of the same gut-wrenching fears and, oh my God, spectacular shock and awe events. And when I saw that they were canceling the NBA season, etc., that's when I knew, oh, okay, they're really going with this, because they don't do that lightly. No, this is a psyop, the likes of which we haven't seen for decades. And it was incredibly effective in programming people with things that they didn't even realize they were being programmed with. But suddenly everyone was 2 weeks to flatten the curve and other such things that they didn't even know where those words were coming from, but they were all programmed to repeat them. They all swallowed them. And many, 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 many billions of people around the world took experimental genetic modification technology masquerading as vaccines because they were told to trust the science. That, to me, is essentially a 9/11 type event, a shock and awe terror event that scared people into compliance and to doing what they were told. Thankfully, that false flag and the power of it has been broken much more quickly than the 9/11 false flag was broken in the public mind. But it does go to show that it can still work, and especially if it comes from a completely different vector in a completely different way that most people are not thinking about.
Well, I'm going to tell you, this is what kind of bothered me about that whole time, is how quickly people kind of shock back to that, grabbing toilet paper off the shelves at Walmart and the shelves are cleared and stuff. I was calling it artificial scarcity mart when I had to go there. But, I can foresee a scenario, and this is going to sound wild and fantastic, but I use this as an example for, what I think about our sociology. If the mainstream media suddenly came down and said, space aliens came down quietly and met with the President of the United States in the Oval Office, and we have to now abide by something for our greater good, and, we can't prove that the space aliens were here, but all the media is saying this, and we now have to follow this agenda to try to repel them or something. The person, and even if the media said to protect our thoughts from the space aliens, we got to wear tinfoil hats on our head. The person who says, well, I want to see evidence of a space alien. I want to actually see one. I'm not going to just believe there's a space alien. they would call that person a conspiracy theorist.
Yep.
If that person didn't wear their tinfoil hat, everyone would be saying, "Where is your hat? Why aren't you? What are you, some conspiracy theorist? Put your tinfoil hat on," right? So I really think the public, I do. I mean, even this is a bizarre, make-believe scenario. I really think the public would fall into line if it was a crazy enough situation. I mean, if another building came down, they might question it. If it was another pandemic, they might question it. But they always come up with some new angle, some new thing. And maybe that's going to be an angle at some point, too. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, actually, I have a 2015 report on how to fake an alien invasion, talking about the types of blue beam project technologies and other such things that already exist and have been talked about in various documents as, potentially. And we all remember when Reagan was musing about, well, if there was an extraterrestrial threat, how quickly we would all unite as a people. And Bill Clinton said similar things, and et cetera, et cetera. So at the very least, I mean, that is as far-fetched and as outlandish and as crazy as that seems to us today. It is certainly something that could be used in the future. But even as I get your general point, though, it's not specifically about aliens or what have you. It's just, something different from a completely different perspective that people weren't expecting. They can still get in line very quickly. And I think that the idea of, now you have to wear a tinfoil hat to protect yourself. So you're not wearing the tinfoil hat, you're the conspiracy theorist. I think that's a wonderful way of conceptualizing that. And I guess the only thing I would say is that what this always comes back down to is our cognitive sovereignty, that we, at the very least, for the time being, are independent, sovereign human beings who can make up our minds for ourselves. And yes, we may be socially castigated for not going along with the herd on various issues, but at this point, they're still not necessarily throwing you in the cage just for questioning what's going on. Maybe that's coming, and maybe we should be prepared for that. But I, as a bit of an accelerationist on such things, I do think that in a way, perhaps the whole Trump presidency and everything that's happening is in a way good, because at the very, very least, it means half of the American public will be opposed to anything that is presented, and half of the public will go along with it, and vice versa, just swapping team colors depending on what that thing is. So one could imagine if Trump's NIST released a WTC7 report in 2025, at least half of the American population would say, I don't trust NIST. I don't trust this organization. They wouldn't be saying it's been debunked because NIST says it. Whereas 20 years ago, you could say, oh, this government organization said this thing, therefore it's true. And I don't think people will fall for that anymore.
Isn't it sad that politics is what determines things instead of just scientific facts and hardcore evidence like we bring to the table? James Corbett, thank you so much for joining us for our event today. It's always great to talk to you, and I love hearing your perspective, and good luck for you in the next year.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, James.